It is like we started focusing so heavily on eradicating intolerance that we just went ahead and created it anew. So there was this election on Tuesday. Some people are elated by the outcome, others not so much. But I have a message for the progressives who are horrified by the result. Use this opportunity to reevaluate your approach. Progressive politics are not and have never been the majority opinion. And that's fine, we can agree to disagree. Except that the progressive contribution to culture has more or less been to demand unquestioned compliance with progressive ideology in public discourse. And anything less than that is equated with utter moral vacancy and is treated as grounds for exclusion from public participation. Don't believe me? Just try to refuse participating in a land acknowledgement, or raise a complaint about a black-only school dance, or refer to a transgender woman as he, him, and see how far that gets you. And look, if you're engaging in identity politics of race and gender by targeting individuals and harassing them, you certainly don't have my support. I believe in kindness and decency unconditionally. But over the past 2 decades, far too many progressive-leaning liberals have shifted from using social propriety to promote kind behavior to legislating their view of being kind and inclusive in the process of excluding others in their wrong speech. It is like we started focusing so heavily on eradicating intolerance that we just went ahead and created it anew. Now look, Trump was not elected because of identity politics. Trump, like every president of the last half-century, was elected for economic reasons. Trump was ultimately successful thanks to a strong disillusionment towards the economic status quo that has failed to serve the middle class for a very, very long time. And to those of you who have been standing on the street corner yelling that Trump's economic proposal is ludicrous and not going to fix the situation, yeah, I agree with you, because Trump's trade proposal contradicts the basic Keynesian economic principles we've lauded since the Great Depression. But we can't lose sight that Democrats have held the presidency for 12 of the past 16 years, and prosperity simply hasn't been realized. And the reasons for that are complex, and certainly not all on Democratic shoulders, but the disillusionment, it is understandable. But that's where culture wars and identity politics come into the mix, because if those who voted for Trump did so because of economic disillusionment, those who didn't vote for Trump drew ire from his behavior. They objected that he's anti-democratic, that he's authoritarian, that what Trump advocates and embodies is a liberalism at its core. And yeah, that is all true, and progressives drive themselves wild lamenting how anyone could possibly be willing to throw their vote behind someone who's fundamentally illiberal. But what progressives have missed is that Trump's illiberalism doesn't separate him from their politics, it just reflects them back, perhaps a little more blatantly and directly. And that's because for more than 2 decades, we've been eroding the basic principles of liberalism at the altar of identity politics. What Trump has done is respond to a liberalism that has crept through our institutions with a different, stronger illiberalism that appeals to a different audience. In past decades, conservatives have cried foul when ideology counter to their beliefs have been enforced as the only acceptable public standard, and we've marginalized their perspectives. Is it any surprise that 2 decades later, they've now thrown their support behind the man who validates their perspective? Let's illustrate this with transgender matters, which became a prominent wedge issue in the recent election. Trump's Republicans are in deep illiberal territory with what they've promoted in the transgender conversation. Whether we're discussing hormones or surgeries or social participation in general, these issues are matters of individual liberty, and the Trump agenda has been very direct in making clear they will promote a particular ideology surrounding sex upon everyone and do so at the expense of the expression and participation of transgender people. And regardless whether you like those positions or not, that is a problem if we care about liberalism. But guess what? It's also illiberal to withhold liberty from parents and families who do not wish progressive perspectives on sex and gender to be taught as an unquestionable truth to their children. And it's also illiberal to enshrine policies and practices that benefit certain marginalized identities at the expense of those who are deemed to be a privileged majority. And it's definitely illiberal to legally mandate the language other people must use to refer to someone like myself. And all of that illiberalism, it's been going on for far more than a decade. And when it's been called out, dissenters have been canceled and treated as outcasts. In the progressive attempt to support marginalized identities, we've marginalized those on the right who are not on board. And don't get me wrong, I believe in many of the intentions behind the progressive movement. I want to create acceptance and inclusivity. I'm truly not anti-trans. But lauding liberalism means to advocate for those values while also creating space for disagreement. It means modeling the kindness and inclusivity we want to see while also accepting someone else's unacceptance. In a post-COVID world, I have some friends who still judge anyone who doesn't wear a mask everywhere, and others who think masks should be illegal. But in a liberal society, we let people wear a mask if they'd like, and we let others not wear a mask if they don't want to. We maximize liberty to the extent that we reasonably can. Progressives, you're right that Trump Republicans are illiberal at their very core, and that's something I find disquieting. But if you want that message to resonate with the majority in the middle who have been swayed towards MAGAism, you need to rethink your approach and fix your own liberalism problem first.